put off by how long this video is, don't worry, I try to jam-pack my videos with as much content and as much detail as I possibly can. Anything I feel I can comment on and that I feel you might be interested in, I pretty much put in the video. I try not to repeat myself and talk fairly fast. If the video is too long for you, I have recorded a shorter version and the link will be in the description box. I got this either as a present or I got it on discount, so I did not pay very much money for this and am thus not bitter on account of that. Gex video game review. I should say right off the bat, I am taking a slightly different approach. I am taking on more hours and responsibilities at work, so I had to cut preparation time for this in any way I could. So streaming using notes via Google Drive and my new smartphone is how it's going to be. Now, starting with the plot. Gex is a gecko who's basically addicted to television, and one day he is sitting and watching television and he you know, shoots a tongue out and eats a fly, as he's done a million times before. But this fly turns out to be a secret transmitter from Rez, who runs the media dimension. And once this transmitter is inside of Gex, Rez reaches out of Gex's television screen and grabs him with this big silvery sharp-fingered fist, pulls him into the television. And this, you know, he does this from his man cave. He has like 5 television screens right around him. He's just sitting there with the remote, you know, just every guy's dream. And basically, you know, Gex is now in the media dimension and has to fight his way out somehow. And if Rez gets his way, he will turn Gex into a, what's it called, like a mascot. So basically he'll, you know, oh, mascot, sure, that's not, no, literally he's gonna bronze you down, and you're gonna be the, you know, it's not the fun kind of mascot who's running around in a big suit. You know, I guess it would be the meta suit kind of thing, where like in TMNT, the 2007 movie and game, you know, Michelangelo running around in an oversized turtle costume. No, you will literally be a statue. Now, this is the only of the Gex games that I have played at all. I don't currently plan on getting the rest, though I will say I enjoyed this one a lot. Now, basically what you're doing, the objective is you're going around finding television remotes, and you know, there might be there's at least one in a level, maybe there's 2. Some will also have, you know, hidden portals to bonus levels and such. And you know, basically every time you go into a level, you do so by entering a TV. So you know, you find a remote, you turn on a new TV. That makes sense. And this was back before universal remotes, and back when you might have, you know, 10 different remotes for, you know, just to make sure you can run, you know, TV, VCR, and yeah, other things. Now, Gex as a character, this is where I usually go into, you know, what are the characters like. There's really only Gex. Like there are, you know, there are, of course, you're going to encounter living beings, but they don't really have an awful lot of personality, you know. But you know, he's a smartass. He's constantly quoting pop culture. And on the title screen, you see he wears sunglasses down, so you know he's got attitude, and his face looks like he's sucking on a lemon. You know, he's really sarcastic, which I think is fine. They don't all have to be like Rayman, you know, just so happy all the time. He's just jazzed about being on the show, man. Or Crash Bandicoot, who just looks confused, anxious, scared, and ready to use violence against these things he doesn't understand. Your typical Republican there. And, you know, when you see Gex pulled in, there are not a lot of, like, cutscenes in this, but, you know, you know, of course you're going to get your opening and your ending, and the opening where, you know, gloriously, you're not just told that this happens. No, you see, you know, you see him swallow the fly, and then you see him being pulled into the TV, and it's real nightmare fuel, as well as just the very 90s thing. And nightmare fuel in kids, you know, entertainment was a very 90s thing. So yeah, and you know, this is very much about the 90s, you know, a snapshot of the 90s, you know, especially what was on TV. So, you know, what children were interested in. And, you know, on TV, you know, in general, the vast majority of 90s heroes for kids, you know, had attitude, were cool and or correct wise, especially TV ones. And, you know, for those who might not remember, you know, just as a few examples, other than Gex, you know, I've already mentioned Rayman and Crash Bandicoot. They don't do it a lot, but they do, you know, yeah, they do make snarky. There's snark in the games, and the games are from their perspective. So, and you know, you've got Sonic the Hedgehog, the really all four of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, maybe Leonardo less so than the other three, and I suppose Raphael was the snarkiest one for sure. And let's see, what I guess that more or less covers like the really big, yeah. Now there's the Gex talks a lot, and so he has this series of catchphrases. Briefly, in case you're wondering, every single time I get to a new topic, I'm gonna try to write down I've got a digital timer going. I'm gonna try to write down the time code so that I can still do time codes without having to sit and listen through every second of the video afterwards. But yeah, you know, he says a lot, and there are a few times where this actually gets to be a little bit of an issue, because sometimes I think they do have some kind of programming in there that makes sure that it's random what he says, because he doesn't always have an awful lot of different things to say about a, you know, in a given situation. But this doesn't always work well, and that's really, sometimes he'll be saying the same thing 2 or 3 times in a row. This doesn't happen a lot, but in the course of a level, maybe he'll repeat himself, and that's unfortunate. Now, everything Gex says is, you know, he's voiced entirely by Gould. That's Dana, the stand-up comedian, not Elliot, Trump's least favorite actor. And a lot of these are pop culture references, so he'll quote stuff, and most of the time it works. There are a few where, like, the way he says it doesn't really work. It's not always going to be direct quotes, but he references Star Trek, and he does a fairly decent Will Shatner, and Trump's favorite actor. And there are, there's of course the issue, if you don't know the references, it's not gonna do much for you. But yeah, when this came out, and I do remember enough about the 90s, that was my childhood, so if you play this today and you didn't live through the 90s, it's not gonna do much for you. But that's always the way it goes with stuff that's very specific to its time. And I think there's a lot of value to stuff, to culture that explicitly is about its own time period. Now, one thing that is, if you don't like them, you can there is a menu option, just go in there, switch it off, and that's it. So I really appreciate that, because there are way too many games where that should be an option and it isn't. And also, if you do just turn them off, you'll find that it's not like there are more recent games will use what the protagonist says to maybe help further plot or character. That's not what Gex is. Gex is just commenting on what's happening. The way, he's MST3K'ing. He's his own experience, basically. And I have to say, I enjoyed the vast majority of them. A lot of the, yeah, in most of the game, you kill TVs. And, Gex might then say, that's for 12 years of Full House. Yeah. If you get hurt, he might go, Adrian, and, like, or Wilma. So, yeah. And there's, there are these various worlds I'll get more into. One of them's called New Toonland. It's about animation. When when I first entered the first level, he said, it looks like Beetlejuice threw up. That is just spot on. That's totally what it looks like. And I mean that in the most positive way. And, if you, like, exit a level very suddenly, he might say, gee, Scoob, let's get back to the mystery van. I'm sorry, that's a terrible impersonation. It's been a lot of years since I sat down and watched, a Scooby-Doo. Anyway, and I do think it's worth noting, not all the sayings are references to something else. He does sometimes say things that are specific to the game. Probably one of your most potent weapons are your tail, and he will say, when you use it, he'll say, it's tail time, or you'll do the tail bounce, which I'll get into, and he'll say, that's what I call getting some tail. Yeah. Now, for research for this, I tried to replay recently every action platformer that I have a copy of, and I'll also briefly go through the ones I have played, so kind of my background for this. I have played every Commander Keen game that of the original ones, the 6 regular ones, Keen Dreams. I haven't played, there was like one for Game Boy something. I haven't played that one. If someone who can make it happen is listening, please make more Commander Keen games. You know, Invasion of the Vorticons, that game was my childhood. So, yeah, I would absolutely, I would play it immediately if you put out another, you know, and I know, I guess today it would probably be 3D. I think it could work in 3D as well. I think it's not like Sonic, but it's more like Mario. I think the leap from 2D to 3D could work. But yeah, so there's that. There's Dark Ages. I don't know if you want to call. Yeah, I suppose the Prince of Persia games. Yeah, they count as platformers. Now I couldn't get working again, but I have completed the 1990s. I want to say it came out for Game Boy, but it might have been the NES or SNES, something. The Amazing Spider-Man game, the one where, you know, Spidey will hear over the radio a message from the next boss he has to fight, then go through a level. At the end of the level, he fights the boss. Yeah. And the 1991 Game Boy game Terminator 2 Judgment Day, where you start as, you know, you start out in the future, and then you spend, you know, yeah, you spend a lot of the game in present day, you know, running around as the yeah, as it's been too long, but I think, you know, Arnold's character. I re-completed 1994's Earthworm Jim game for the, I don't know, I've probably played it maybe a few dozen times or something. I have completed the second one, but it's been a while. You'll know if you watched my review of it that I'm not the biggest fan of the second one. And 1995's Game Boy game Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, the one where you're going around as one of the Rangers. It's basically black and white, and, you know, yeah, you're beating up putties, and you'll fight the big boss characters that you know from the show and such. And I recompleted 1995's Rayman, and it took me just over 10 hours. Oh, and Earthworm Jim took me an hour and a half. I replayed 1998's Heart of Darkness, which, again, dozens of times. At least I've owned it since it came out. And that took me just over 2 hours. I have played through Jazz Jackrabbit 1 and 2. It's been a long time since I played. I don't currently own a full version of the second one. I think I gave that to a friend. That was a mistake, because I really enjoyed that game, but I've even made levels for it back when I had it. I have completed the first one, but it's been some years since. I find that if you have all the parts of the first one, it gets a little long in the long run, and really only I suppose I could have just played the first few parts, the really super official ones that are easily the best ones, but it always bothered me that the big, mean-looking, what's it called? Turtles, that they take as the same amount of hits to die as the regular ones. That always threw me off. But anyway. And I replayed 1998's Crash Bandicoot Warped. And that one, I only played just the regular games, because I don't really have the wrists for yeah. But that took me about 3.5 hours to just complete the regular levels once each. And I have played the second Crash Bandicoot game, but it's been years. Now, this game, excuse me, itself took me 6 hours to complete. and that is without, like, I didn't particularly go back and get everything. You know, I didn't go to very many bonus areas. If I play it again, I probably will play this again. I wouldn't rule out, like, yeah, I would, I might spend more time and try to find everything and such. And that takes us to abilities. Which, and that this is something I've found to be, as far as I know, this is unique to, maybe, no, I honestly, I haven't seen it in any other games. I presume it's in some of the, you know, I know that there's at least 3 Gex games. And like I said, I haven't really looked into them, but I would imagine that this is in them as well. If you're just walking on the ground, you'll just walk normally. But if you touch any, you know, consistent surface, any surface that doesn't harm you, and most don't, and that isn't, like, you know, if it's a really small, it needs to have enough room for your entire body. If so, you will use the suction cups on Gex's feet to stick to that surface, and you can stick to it as long as you want to, and you can crawl between surfaces. You know, now you're on the ceiling, now you're on the wall, now you're on the ceiling again. You know, you can even crawl on the background if it's solid. You know, the one thing I do find frustrating is when you're on the background, turning gets really awkward. Basically, if I'm facing left and I hit right, that would, you'd expect that to have him turn right, but it'll just move him right. He'll just back up right instead. And really, if I recall, you know, I didn't walk on the walls that much in the last few levels, but if I recall, the trick is basically to, you can't have him turn directly from left to right or vice versa. You have to point him up or down first and then to the other direction. And I forget if you maybe need a little bit of walking space up or down in order to do it also. But the problem is that the direction you face is the direction you shoot your power up in, so it's a pretty big deal. And you can, you know, in order to just, you know, latch onto something, you just have to touch it directly, and usually you're jumping into it. If you just, if you're walking on the ground and you reach a wall and you just walk into it, that's not really, he's gonna do that classic, you know, platform thing where he, like, he's acting as if he's, like, trying to put, yeah, he's trying to push the wall when you're going up against the wall, and obviously he's not going to be able to push it. But yeah, the moment that you jump and, you know, touch that wall, sometimes you have to be moving into it, he'll grab on, and you can jump between walls that you can, you know, attach yourself to. And they use this really well to give you a lot of very different, I'll get into more as I get into specific levels and such, but it's a very clever idea, and it's, as far as I know, unique. I haven't seen it in any of the others, and that's really impressive. You know, I mean, something that's really cool, you know, like the helicopter, you know, using something to you know, basically float downwards slower. The games don't really let you fly, but something like that, you know, you've got that in Rayman, Crash Bandicoot Warped, you've got it in Earthworm Jim, you know, both Earthworm Jim games, although it's not the same exact way in both, you know, good idea as well, and those games use it well, but, you know, if you're going into one of these and you're like, you really want a cool, unique ability, yeah, the suction cups are it. And one thing that is worth noting, though, is that this game really only has the one type of level, where, you know, Rayman has few, but mostly sticks to the one type. Crash Bandicoot has a handful, but there are more of the regular ones of the others, but if you combine the others, there are almost as many levels of those as the regular ones. But, you know, Crash Bandicoot, now you're racing, now you're riding an animal, now you're underwater. You know, Rayman, you've got, you know, okay, now you're planting seeds so you can jump, so you can get higher up to... In this, it really is always, you know, I mean, the boss levels are, of course, a little different. You know, obviously, they're not this. You're not running through, because the bosses do have specific levels in this. They have a level to themselves, basically. But that's it. You know, those you're obviously doing stuff a little differently because you're fighting a boss, but it's still basically the same. Now, and unlike the, you know, yeah, unlike Rayman and Crash Bandicoot Warped, you don't unlock new abilities along the way. So, you know, similar to Earthworm Jim, I'll get more into similarities between those two games, because there are several. And the gameplay is really, really fun and quite addictive. Now, moving on to the attacks that you can do. You know, the tail whip is the main attack. In general, your tail is... You can essentially always attack with your tail. Now, the tail whip is just, you know, you're attacking in the direction you're facing, and it has reasonable range. You know, not huge, but, you know, it's... Yeah, it's a platformer. You're not supposed to be able to attack very far away. That's, you know, and if you crouch, you can whip much, much faster. And if you're if you're crawling on a surface, you can also whip very fast. And this is when you're just whipping, you know, quote-unquote, around yourself. When you're on a, you know, you can tail whip no matter what situation you're in. If you're on the ground, if you're in midair, if you're crawling on a surface, you can tail whip no matter what. And when, you know, when you're crawling on something, you can do it in several different directions. So that's really, really cool. If you're crawling on the background, it's really only the one, but that is an attack that, you know, like I said, he whips all the way around himself. And which is also essentially... Well, actually, no, when you're on the ground, is in the direction you're facing, yeah. But when you're on the... If you're on the ceiling, for example, you can press the up key and then tail whip, and he will whip his tail, you know, upwards from his perspective. Not you know, like I said, you're on the ceiling, so you're not whipping at the ceiling, but he whips his tail up, you know, over his back, you might say, yeah. And that's, yeah, that comes in incredibly useful, you know, and And when you're... yeah, I think that covers that. And the tongue, you know, the tongue is used both for shooting out power-ups and for eating power-ups. And the tongue you can also aim the tongue you can aim no matter where you are. You know, even if you're on the ground, you can still aim it upwards, which is good, because otherwise there's a lot of them that you'd have much more trouble grabbing. And you can also tail bounce, and you know, basically the idea is that Gex forms his tail into a spring, and he springs on it. Now, it doesn't spring if you're not hitting something that quote-unquote reacts. You know, we're talking an enemy, there are blocks that you can break, you know, straight up Super Mario style. You can break them by jumping up into them, so very Super Mario. But yeah, you know, using that, yeah, you can tail bounce just on the ground, and it's just, you know, it's just not going to bounce you. But when you are, when you do tail bounce on something that reacts, every time you tail bounce on one of those things, you will reach a little bit higher. And there are, of course, areas where, yeah, you'll need to bounce off several enemies in a row and keep moving, and still be careful that you don't, you know, the bounce works best if the thing is underneath you. If you accidentally, you know, if you didn't get high enough up from bounce 2 or 3, then bounce 4, you know, 3 or 4 is going to cause some trouble for you. You might hit it instead of bouncing off it, and that might mean you've, you know, it'll definitely mean you lose health. It might also mean you fall down, or that your next bounce isn't so good. So yeah. And there are even some things that, some very specific things that would otherwise hurt you that won't hurt you if you tail bounce off them, but not all. And basically and some enemies take just 1 hit for you to kill them. For others, it's 2. I'm not sure there's ever really anyone that where it's like a lot different from that. Now, when you use your tongue, you might be hurling out a ball of some sort, which will be based on the power-up, and of course will only happen when you have a power-up. So moving on to power-ups. If you do have a power-up, then the first time you're hit, you will lose your power-up instead of the first of your paws or health. And like I said, you know, you tongue lash is the actual command in order to swallow a power-up bowl, or you know, tail whip. You can also tail whip them for a single empty paw refill. 1 second. Now, the power-ups are all immediate effect. And briefly, you know, it's going to sound obvious. Why would I... No, I'll take the power-up, of course. You start with only 3 paws of health. There are mid-level saves, but they can... You know, if you're not close to one, and you're like, this, I think the level is almost over, and you see a power-up bowl, yeah, you might rather have just 1 more paw of health instead, even if it's a really useful power-up. Now, there are ones that just, you know, refill a single empty paw. There's one that fills all empty paws. There's one that actually fills all the empty ones and adds 1, and that's really useful. And of course, When you die, you will go back to having just the 3 paws. So again, it's a good idea to keep, you know, keep yourself alive in the, yeah. And then, you know, of course, you have extra life. You have one that speeds you up, one that makes you temporarily invincible. And then there are the attack ones. There's one that lets you hurl ice balls, and it literally freezes the enemies into a huge block of ice. Very cartoony. And you then have to break that block of ice, or just get past it, because in a few seconds it will thaw up and the enemy will have taken no damage. But it is really useful against these fire, you know, there are fire spirits, and yeah, it will insta-kill them. So, you know, Pokemon rules there. Then there's one that lets you hurl fireballs, and they will melt the enemy with like a unique, what's it called, a unique animation for each enemy. And the, let's see, there are, and then there's the one that hurls bolts of electricity. It's, you know, it shoots 3, you know, all of them shoot straight, but this one also shoots 2 diagonally, so, you know, left and right, or up or down, up and down. And it shocks enemies so they freeze in this last second of life and then die. And this is where, to briefly get into basically of the games that I've mentioned that I've played of this kind, this one is the most similar to the Earthworm Jim games. You know, where that has the floating helicopter thing, this has suction cups. And yes, some of the others also have flown the helicopter, but the way these 2 games use that is fairly similar. And both have a whip attack, and both let you aim your projectile attack to the sides, up, down, diagonally, up, you know. And you know, one thing that is the difference between them is that in that you can shoot anytime with, you know, even if you don't pick up any power-ups or such. Now, to briefly define the different worlds in the media dimension are based on different genres. There's the Cemetery, which is horror films, New Toonland, which is animation, Jungle Isle, which is adventure films, and Kung Fuville, which is martial arts films. And yeah, as other 90s games, some of these do get a little racist. I'll get a little more into that. And that means 5 total worlds, well, 6 with Planet X, the bonus one, which is, unfortunate, that is less than Rayman, Earthworm Jim, and Crash Bandicoot Warped. And I think also Crash Bandicoot 2. Now, and each, of course, has a boss fight. Now, the graphics are quite nice, and the boss battles are your typical kind of, you know, for this kind of thing. You memorize their moves, and you have to hit them with a specific attack a certain amount of times, and between when you can attack, you're dodging their attacks, and then there's going to be, and you know, and there's going to be a period of time where you just straight up cannot actually, you know, where he will just be incredibly dangerous, and he'll move around some, and yeah, you will have to avoid him during that. And that brings me to the challenge level. And briefly, the music is always very catchy, and this doesn't really have any graphic deaths. I've mentioned how enemies will die, and that's as bad as it gets. So yeah, where Crash Bandicoot Warped has some really nasty ones where it's like, how is this related? How is this allowed to be played by children? But like I said, Nightmare Fuel. I mean, if you drown, Crash will literally wash up as if like a floater on the beach. That's really dark, but yeah. There is only the one difficulty setting, so in that regard there isn't replayability through that, but like I said, you have all these bonus areas and secret areas and levels, so yeah. And when you're hurt, you're temporarily, then you can't be hurt for the next second or so. And there's no fall damage. It's only if you land in something or fall into nothingness or the like that that can hurt you or even kill you immediately if you just fall off an edge or the like. This is much more forgiving than Crash Bandicoot Warped and Rayman, although there is of course the thing that you can't save, so whenever you use a password, you only have the 3 paws and 3 lives for that one, so and of course that means you can just, once if you didn't complete the level and you lost all those, yeah, you just play it again, but that means you have to start all the way over, no mid-level saves. Excuse me. Now, this is one of the last really old-school, tough games, especially for platformers. Basically you're constantly on guard for something that might hurt you or even kill you immediately. The floor might collapse under you. You can move directly into something as you proceed, especially when it has you like slide down or when you're jumping really fast from where you are to the next area. You might suddenly reach something that you then have to avoid, or yeah. And if you just say, well, I could just attack before you see there's something, you might have just destroyed, you might have just popped a possible power-up, or you might have, killed something that you were supposed to tail bounce off of. You might have broken a block that would otherwise help you. Yeah. And something can also come in from above. One thing that is unfortunate is, and that's a problem in a lot of these platformers, unfortunately, you can't tell from looking if something will hurt, help, or do nothing. Obviously, once you've touched it, you will know, but the first time you encounter anything in this game, you don't know if that's gonna hurt you or help you. And yeah, because the thing is, in non-platform games, it might be either, well, obviously, in a non-platform game, health will often come in, a box that has that is white and has a red cross on it. Okay, obviously that's health. That's not going to hurt me to come into contact with. And if it's a bomb, it might be black and blinking red or something. In a platform game, a lot of things are bright and colorful, and so sometimes the enemy is bright and colorful, or sometimes something that looks dark is actually really helpful. And in a lot of these platformers, it's you're moving from one side to the other. In Crash Bandicoot, that's in 3D, so it's from you're almost always moving ahead in the level, and then there are there are some exceptions, of course. And yeah, a lot of these, it's from left to right, Rayman or from Jim. In this one, it is mainly from left to right, but you can sometimes go around in other directions and go backwards and such. The game never really has a time limit on any level, other than bonus levels, of course. And that honestly surprised me a little, but then, I mean, there are other of these games that don't, but, there will be stuff where you can't keep standing in the same spot, but, yeah. And there are a few levels where you're pushed from one side of the screen to the other, and this isn't like touching the screen will hurt you, but if the screen catches up to you and you're standing right in front of something that isn't going to move when you move into it, yeah, you're going to be crushed there. Although it's just, nowhere near as graphic as that, of course, sounds. And, of course, there will be some difficult jumps along the way, and, of course, that means that you have to let the screen partially catch up with you, because you can't jump further than what the screen is showing you when it's pursuing you like that. And if you just jump at the first possible time, you're not going to be able to jump all the way over, or you're going to have to land on something that you shouldn't have landed on. And this doesn't really have any proximity mines like there are in Crash Bandicoot Warped, which you got to be careful around those. You break it, you bought it. And unlike, Rayman and Crash Bandicoot Warped, and, I guess I don't... Earthworm Jim I only have on the PC, and there it auto-saves. You can level select, but I don't know about the original. But if you don't have the original 3DO version of this game, you can't save. You have to get this password, which means you have to find a VHS tape which is hidden in the level, and and that of course means that you can play that level as many times as you want on any copy of the game, but you will start out with the default amount of health and lives and the like. Where, I prefer games that have both, because saving, like I said, that's really useful for when you've gathered a number of lives, and passwords are really useful for when maybe you're playing on somebody else's copy, maybe you just want to show a friend of yours something really cool that's in a late level. Okay, here's the password, type it in, and because you don't have your copy on you, or, and whenever you die, you will go back to the level selection area, but that doesn't mean that the mid-level save didn't work. The first time I was like, I thought it saved. Then, I went back into the level. I don't know if you can go into other levels and this mid-level save will still work. I didn't try that out, but if you just go right back into the level, you will start at the mid-level save. And, and of course, if you don't reach mid-level save, you will have to start the whole level over, even if you got really close to that mid-level save. And I say mid-level save, they're not always specifically at the middle, and sometimes there are more than one in a level, but yeah. But it's one of those big, chunky Polaroid cameras. Remember those? And VHS tapes? Now, moving on to the first of the levels are the cemetery, which is based on horror movies. And and just briefly to go, the you know, on levels in general, some critics have pointed out that the level design is often dull and frustrating. Unfortunately, that is true. The levels can get really huge and have a lot of secrets, and that again, that can be very exciting and stimulating, but it can also get annoying. And I tend to be like, oh great, I found the way, and then, oh, this was a dead end, but it had a secret. Great, now where do I go? And that happened in this, but yeah. But you know, sometimes you'll be going further up than you thought you would, or go down a place that you thought would kill you to go down, or you know, sometimes you can pass straight through walls. And in the cemetery, there are these, you are running around a cemetery. You know, you've got these you know, spiky top, like, you know, gates, and there are these coffin lids that if you step on one, they will launch directly up into the air, sending you directly up into the air. And this doesn't hurt you, but it can send you into something that might hurt you, or it can be something that you need to do in order to proceed. You know, once you get that boost and get into the air, maybe you can make a really difficult jump. Maybe there's an enemy you had to go over in order to, you know. And then there are these really nasty looking tree stumps, like possessed tree, kind of, you know, Evil Dead, or some kind of just really, yeah, really nasty looking. And they kind of have a mouth at the top of the stump, and then they spit these human skulls up into the air. Sometimes it's just one, sometimes it'll be two in a short space of time, and then a brief pause before again. The skulls hurt you if you just touch them, but you can tail whip them to send them flying, which can mean you just killed an enemy by sending a skull flying into his head, which might be easier than just going over there to kill him, especially if there are several. Or you can tail bounce off. Yeah. And yeah, if you may need to bounce off both skulls, and that will send you very high up. And some of the enemies in the cemetery they're called Frankies, and they're basically lizard Frankenstein's monsters, and they're doing the walk, you know, where he's got the arms out, you know, and just, yeah, it's what else did you expect? It's a horror movie themed area, and you're a lizard. And I'm not certain if Rez is a lizard, but there certainly are some, you know, there are lizard-like qualities to his appearance. What Rez is, what I can guarantee you he is he's made up of sharp, silvery, you know, just the teeth and the fingers, just, yeah. And he's got a really creepy, like, deep voice, kind of, yeah, very, very 90s, and, you know, I'll get you next time, Gadget, you know, Dr. Robotnik, I want to say is yeah, Shredder, yeah. And there are these, I'm not certain if they're supposed to be like Jason Voorhees. I don't think it's Leatherface, because it doesn't, yeah, it's like a mix, because he's got I'm almost certain that what he's wearing is a hockey mask, a goalie mask, but what he's running around with is a chainsaw. So yeah, and he like runs across. So you know, if you didn't know that one was coming up, he will run right into, you know, you can tail whip him, or you can, you know, hop out of the way and then tail bounce. But if you weren't ready, it's, yeah, he comes in fast. Some of the enemies really do. And it's also the first place that you see these TVs. I already mentioned you kill these TVs. The TVs, and I really appreciate that, are actually in every single world. You know, all 5 worlds have TVs. They're just not necessarily gonna transport themselves in the same way. You know, they're TVs, so if they didn't have some mode of transportation, they would just be static, and that doesn't make for that interesting of an enemy. They start out flying, and regardless of what they use to transport themselves, the moment that you hit it, you will smack away the transport, and then the TV will fall straight down. And if there's like something it can land on, even if that's a platform that's transporting you or something, it's gonna land there, and then it's gonna turn into a bomb. And I love this. You know, Gex is not the only one who, you know, the game is loaded with references. This is made by people who did nothing in the 90s but watched TV and loved all of this stuff and just absorbed all of this stuff and are able to, you know, it's actually impressive that this game came out in, you know, the 90s. It's really, today, I don't think they're currently making Gex games, but they really should, because today we are really in this camp. You know, you've got online reviews that obsessive pop culture disorder, and, you know, there's Channel Awesome stuff where they go in and they obsess over and constantly make references. You know, I mean, for sure, the people who made this were big fans of MST3K as well, but yeah, it really, they built it and that's, again, that's something that's very specific to this. You know, Earthworm Jim is these kind of, you know, you're going to these, well, yeah, just as a few examples, you know, you go to a junkyard, you go to Planet Heck, you know, it's, yeah, just these various kind of fun, weird ideas. You know, Earthworm Jim, the name of the game is weird, you know. The Rayman, it's based on, you know, okay, now we're gonna do something with music and you're hopping on bongo drums. Now we're gonna do something with paintings and you're, you know, bouncing on like pens and avoiding the tip of the pen, of course. And, you know, Crash Bandicoot, I forget what it's like in 2. I'm almost certain that's around the world as well. But in Warped, they have access to a time machine. So it's not just all around the world, it's also different time. You know, now you're riding a baby tiger, I want to say, across the Great Wall of China as it's being built. Now you're, you know, inside a giant old, like, pyramid, or, you know, stuff like this. This game, you are inside a television. You are inside the media dimension, which is created from all the stuff that's on TV. So, yeah, and it's glorious. But yeah, the TV, once it turns into a bomb, the countdown is the classic SMPTE universal leader. You know, the countdown to film reel: 5, 4, 3. Just, yeah, very, very, yeah. And actually, before you do anything to the TV is just showing static. And that's actually, once you've completed a level, like I said, you enter TVs. That's how you enter a level. Once the level, the level is off before you find the remote for it, of course. Once you've completed it, it gets like static. I'm almost certain that's how, yeah. and like the background will also have like areas that are like, it's as if it's as if there's static underneath everything, and a few places like stuff has rusted away or something, so you can see the static underneath. And there'd be static as like, what's it called, like portals between areas, between like the level itself and the bonus area, for example, is just you find an area and suddenly that area, you know, there's like static, and then you press up to enter that portal, and yeah. And then there are, you know, something that's also in most of the levels are these long sharp spikes and such. But yeah, there's something that you can fall into that instantly kills you, and in the cemetery is this nasty looking green goo that kind of bubbles a little, and it just, yeah, really, you know, you do not want to know what it is. You know, it's the kind of, in Crash Bandicoot Warped, you would know exactly what it did to you. You're kind of glad you don't know, because it's like, I don't know if that's like acid or chemical waste or what it is, and I don't want to know. There are these guillotines that basically they automatically, you know, cut down every 2 or 3 seconds, something like that. And that's not really you can walk right through it, as long as it's, as you do so while the crap, what's it called, the guillotine, the saw area is above you. If you walk into it, even if it didn't fall down on you, if you touch it, you get hurt. But there might be several in a row, and maybe you were just gliding, or maybe you have to run, maybe you just ran up of something that would send you gliding if you didn't run up it. Yeah. And that, yeah, that covers the cemetery. So moving on to New Toonland, this is the one that was built up around animation. And again, yeah, clearly they love animation. You know, there are these, there are a lot of bright colors. There are these, a piano or an anvil will suddenly drop out of the sky, and there's like a brief, you know, warning. It doesn't just happen and immediately you're, no, there's like a brief warning. And this is also where I think, yeah, they're in other levels as well, but there are these cameras that, you know, just a purple, you know, actually I guess it's a project, yeah, something like that. You tail whip it, and it reverses, it toggles a wall on or off, and that wall might have just been in your way, sir, from letting you progress. Sometimes, however, they actually, oh wait, no, sorry, that's something else, which I will get into now. There are these big magician's boxes, and you know, the kind where it's like, you know, oh, ta-da, she was in here the whole, you know, you saw her disappear, now she comes out of here, or she walked into there, and yeah. And some of them you can actually go through, and they'll have like, it'll just be a brick wall, or, you know, there'll be an incoming train that heads directly towards the camera, you know, like in that old, one of those very first movies that were shown at all, where people ran from the theater because they thought that there was a train that was going to hit them. You know, it might be a showering woman who, you know, quickly covers up, and it just, yeah. The ones you do need, again, have static in them that lets you teleport between, you know, often it'll be between nighttime and daytime of this area, and there will be some interesting difference that, yeah, you know, and it's not just, oh, well, I don't feel like going. No, you have to go to, as an example, maybe during the daytime, well, there's nothing for me to jump from here to over there. I know over there is the only place I haven't already gone, so it must be where I go. Well, let's go to nighttime. Look at that. Stars and the moon that I can jump off of. And be careful with the moon, because it'll let you fall at just nothing. So, yeah. And in Toonland, the TVs are on tank treads, and those work like the suction cups. They can be moving between the walls and the ceiling. And yeah. There's this lizard Superman, and when he dies, there's like a visual pow, like the Batman, you know, well, yeah, really Batman comics or the West show. And then there's this suspended dynamite, which when you touch it, it explodes soon after, and for one thing, that means you just lost your footing. For another, it hurts you, excuse me, if you were standing on it, so you have to jump between these, and yeah. And then other times there are these suspended in the wall carrots, and you can almost see this one coming. Once you jump onto it, hurry and move on, because Bugs Bunny, you don't see him, but the carrot will very quickly be eaten, and yeah. I have no idea how they managed to get away with this rights-wise, but again, if they could make another one, I mean, yeah, if they could just be as, I guess some of it is just vague enough that really, yeah, that must be how it is, because otherwise it would be insane that for this one game they'd have to pay for all these different rights. You know, I mean, this kind of thing, it's something you expect to see in like a comedy skit, that, you know, or something like that online. You don't expect it in a you know, in a game that was made by you know, big developers. You don't, yeah, you know, usually when you do a licensed game, you do just the one license. You stay away from other licenses, and this isn't a licensed game. Gex was created for this game, I'm almost certain. And then there are Smurfs. You know, they're purple instead of blue, and I want to say the hat is like green instead of white, but they're definitely Smurfs. And they start out in this, like, they formed a ball of their bodies. They're like, you know, they're holding hands, and yeah, they formed a ball, and they start out rolling around in this ball, and once the first time you attack, you just break the ball, and you hear this sound of like bowling pins being knocked out. I think a strike yeah. And then you have to deal with them one by one, and they start tossing gifts at you, and these gifts hurt, of course, but yeah, they can be a real pain. But yeah, like little wrapped, you know, gift boxes, presents, you know. And yeah, that's the Smurfs right there. And there are these jack-in-the-box boxing gloves that, you know, you have to avoid. And the level design gets very cartoony and nonsensical, very, you know, it doesn't follow any kind of logical, you're just, yeah, it's, okay, now we're over here, I guess. And that is maybe also where it sometimes gets a little frustrating. Sometimes more than a little. And then yeah, you'll be like crawling on the background, then on a wall, and there'll be a very difficult jump between them. And there's this, I'm pretty sure it's a rabbit, and it's basically just wearing a regular suit. The first time you hit him, the suit goes off, and he like bulks up, and then the next time you hit him, he just dies. So maybe that's supposed to be like a Superman reference also. And then there's one where you stand on or attach to rockets. Yes, if you're attached to it, and there's just barely enough room for you to be on it. So don't get antsy and try to crawl up or down, because up, you just got impaled on the tip. You don't die, but it hurts you and you're falling off. Down, you just touched the what's it called, the propulsion. Yeah. And of course, it's not just, okay, so I'm taking a rocket, now I'm going to a... No. You jump between the rockets using the suction cups. Now I'm traveling up on the side of one rocket, then I jump from that rocket to the underside of another rocket. Yeah. And this is another thing, that TVs might land on the rocket, and there's not a lot of room for both you and the rocket. And, okay, you can jump to avoid the TV, but the rocket's not going to stop moving just because you jumped. So, yeah. And of course, they're rockets, so the moment they hit something, they explode. And again, you might fall to your death if you're still on it. And then there are blue rockets. You can guide these up or down by standing, let's see, up. Yeah, it's like you're tilting it. So if you're at the... I want to say that the tip is down and the propulsion is... I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. And again, that's, it's difficult to avoid. At first, certainly I had trouble not going a little bit too far in one of those two directions, and suddenly I fall off the thing. And then there's this enemy. It's like a green alien, not too interesting, but it's in what I'm pretty sure is supposed to be the Jetson flying car, and underneath it, if you're underneath it, he will shoot a big boxing glove out of it. And another enemy is Snarf from the Thundercats, and his attack is to make like the Tex Avery Wolf face when he sees Red Hot Riding Hood, the eyes that pop out. And again, it's really, really clever to look at that and say, that could be used as an attack in a video game. I mean, they pop right into you like that. Yeah, it's, with enough force, why wouldn't they be able to? And that takes us to Jungle Isle. And immediately when I enter the first level, Gex is like, all this thanks to Miracle Growth. Yeah. And and when I enter that area of the overall, before I even enter a level, he starts singing the George of the Jungle theme. And, a level might be me going down the Amazon River. There's at least one old temple to deal with in there. And the TVs now drive this one-wheeled cycle, like a unicycle, I guess is what it's called, and fire electrical bolts straight to the sides, diagonally up or down. They get really annoying to deal with. And enemies include like a big gorilla, a really big spider, like almost the size of Gex, which, yeah, it's the Amazon, so yeah. And something that really, I couldn't tell this at first, you're able to briefly jump in water, and that's safe. I thought if I touch that, I will drown, but yeah. If after a little while, it was, I wasn't even really trying to jump into the water. I tried to jump past, and I landed in the water, and I could just tell, oh, well, I'm not drowning immediately. Now, and sometimes I'll be sailing on the Amazon River, and maybe I have to duck under or jump over obstacles along the way. You won't always have something to sail on. And then there are these huge piranhas. And some of them are, in the water, so, be careful when you tread water. Some of them will jump out of the water, either just straight up, similar to, Rayman. I want to say some Super Mario also, which I didn't really mention in the obvious, I'm from '86. Obviously, I played Super Mario 1 and 2. We didn't get Super Mario Land 3. It's BS. We got Wario Land instead. But yeah, so I've played all of those dozens of times, on my Game Boy. And but yeah, Mario 64, of course. But not too much recent Mario. Now, the temple is one of those places where the level will follow me because, it's falling apart. So, yeah. And one of the enemies is Indiana Jones as a lizard, and annoyingly, his whip slightly outranges my tail whip. And then that's where the racism comes in. There's this dancing, spear-wielding native, and yeah, and if I try to jump over him, he will point and poke up the spear. And when in one of these levels, when I activated the mid-level save, he'd go, "Holiday Snap, very good." So yeah, nudge nudge sketch reference. That's I approve. And that takes us to Kung Fuville. And this is, of course, based on martial arts films from from Asian countries, and in one I'm running through Chinatown, and of course he goes, "Forget it, Jake, it's Chinatown." And when the level starts, I look like an old Asian man with a cane, and then Gex throws, it turns out that the long white beard was just, fake, and he tears it off. Yeah. And there's, of course, a sumo wrestler enemy, and I can jump on his belly once I've defeated him. And, to bounce higher. And, of course, the lightning guy from Big Trouble in Little China is there, and Gex says, "Oh, it's Raiden." Yeah. And then there are, like, these fish that all stay in the water. I'm not sure if they're koi. I don't really have an eye for fish. And there are these electric eels, of course, which you want to avoid. And then there are these, you're still sometimes treading water. There's green water that'll hurt you, and then there's red water which will immediately kill you. And there are some statues. There's like a sword that swings like a pendulum, but all the way around on its own. Chinese firecrackers, of course, and these explode maybe a second after you touch them. And this is whether you tread, whether you tail whip, regardless. You touch them, they start blowing up, and there might be a lot, they're Chinese firecrackers, so a lot in a line, and yeah. And with the explosion, they can hurt you and or enemies, and sometimes that's just a way to attack. you see an enemy, you see a few Chinese firecrackers, you tail whip him and stand back and wait for it to, yeah. And he'll go snap, crackle, yeah. And sometimes the path is made up of Chinese firecrackers. And if you would accidentally start detonating them, like I said, they might be in a long line. If you detonate the first one, they're going to keep going. And if you weren't ready to move with it, you know, either it's just become a lot more difficult, or there's, you know, or you just have to try again, like you can't make that jump, maybe. And one level, of course, Gex starts out singing Everybody Was Kung Fu Fighting. And there's a level where you're mostly underwater, and that gets annoying because the jumping for that is awkward. And one thing that does, I guess this approaches one more level type. Once you're under the water, you can't crawl on any surface. You don't stick to them. So it doesn't matter what surface you're near or anything, you are jumping underwater. It's somewhat similar to Jazz Jackrabbit 1 when he, yeah. But something that's really cool is you spend the level underwater, almost entirely underwater. The last section of water that you have to go through, the water will change from clear and safe to green, which hurts you. It doesn't kill you, but hurts you. And that means you're very quickly moving between these safe points that, like, you know, basically it spends maybe a second or two as green water, and that's fine. That's enough for you to move between these checkpoints. But if you go under the water and you keep staying in the water, yeah, you're gonna lose. Like I said, you only start out with 3 paws. That means you can only be hit twice without dying, unless you find, and you're not gonna just find health right there. So yeah, you have to get to the checkpoint, you know, attach yourself to a wall and wait for the water to turn clear again, then hurry. And yeah, that was quite good. Again, somewhat frustrating, but very fun. And there's, of course, a ninja lizard. And once when I tail bounce, he starts singing the Spider-Man theme. You know, does whatever a spider can. And there are a lot of full hampers because Chinese laundries, yeah. And there's a lot of red water in one level, and yeah, I have to jump over it, you know, using platforms, of course. And a lot of these platforms are this brownish yellow color, and once you've touched one of those, you know that that means they start sinking the moment that you touch them. And that means that you have to jump very quickly between them. And the further you get in the level, the more of these there are, and the more, you know, some of them you're crawling between and you're maybe holding on to one. Even, you know, at the start, it's gonna be so high that you can't climb to the top of it. The screen ends before there. And you have to grab onto it and keep climbing up as it sinks, and eventually it'll be so far down you can go over it and then jump to the next and the next, and yeah. And the last of them, I can just barely touch the last platform before it hits the water, so that's really cool, and that took several tries. And, you know, when the level ends, you know, Gex might go, Obi-Wan has taught you well. Because, you know, there's a lot of samurai to the, yeah, to the Jedi. And that takes us to the final area, Rezopolis. And the yeah, the basically all of Rezopolis is these large, ugly, automated, robotic industrial plants. And in this, the tank TV and cycle TV are both present, and there are these pools of liquid that you die immediately from touching, and these silvery bubbles that float directly up. To me, they look like Quicksilver, but and certainly they do hurt to touch, but you can't bounce off them. And if they hit the ceiling, they'll kind of pop, and what remains will immediately fall down, and that remain can also hurt you if you. But sometimes the Gex sounds like he says in a very high pitch, "This is what helium does to my voice." So maybe they're supposed to be helium. That would explain why they're floating up. But yeah, if your helium balloons hurt to touch, there's something wrong with either the helium or the balloon. And then there are these knights that joust everything, and at first you're like, that's just silly. They will break blocks that might have been useful to you, so yeah, hurry up and stop them. And when they hit something, it has like a boing sound, and yeah, it's very slapsticky, and they will joust right off edges. They're just that eager to, yeah. And when you kill a TV, Gex will say, "Kill your TV, man." And there are these pneumatic tubes that you travel through, and some of them get very long, and you better get ready for it to suddenly spit you out, and you have to, maybe there's an enemy, maybe there's something you have to grab onto. Yeah. And then there's also this kind of TV static venom, which can separate off into smaller portions that are also dangerous. And in one of these Rezopolis levels, Gex starts out going, "Spock, do you read me?" Which, because it looks very futuristic, I think that's what they're getting at with that. And like I said, it looks very ugly and dirty and industrial, so he'll also say, "This is, so this is what New Jersey looks like." And because there are a lot of conveyor belts, he'll sometimes say, "This is the worst health club I've ever been to, and I'm working hard but getting nowhere." And they get really, really frustrating, the conveyor belts, because, yeah, now you're on one that sends you backwards. If you go backwards, you die. Oh, now you're on one that sends you forwards. You go forwards, you die. And yeah. And he'll go, "Where's Jane Fonda?" I guess because of the pollution. And when he did the mid-level save photo, he sang "Time of Your Lives." So yeah, the Kodak jingle. And there are a lot of spikes, and yeah, and a lot of TVs, maybe a dozen in a single area. And one time it crashed, but I had been playing for like 20 minutes. I had destroyed all those TVs several times. Yeah, eventually it did give in there, but and that sucks a little because I did lose a mid-level save there, but it didn't take me long to get back. And regardless of when and what you're playing, if you keep doing something that takes a lot of resources for it, it will eventually give out. And now in this level, the spring TV is back, and the flying TVs will now go diagonally left, right, not just up and down. And yeah, they get really challenging. And then there's this really obnoxious machine that every second or so spits out a component. I don't know, looks like a car engine maybe. It doesn't hurt me, but it pushes me with its weight, and it'll often land on one of these conveyor belts, And, you know, there'll be several conveyor belts in a row with several of these machines that spit out in a row. Yeah, that gets really annoying. And, you know, the level really badly wants to try to slide me into an insta-kill pool. And that covers everything I wanted to say, but to briefly, it's a lot of fun, and yeah, if you enjoy platformers and you remember the 90s, I would say give it a shot. Just note that if you don't find the password, if you don't find the VHS tape in a level, you're not going to get the password for the next level. You know, and obviously another thing you can do is to, you know, make sure you have enough hours. Like I said, it took me 6 hours. If you have 6 hours in a row, your wrists can take it, and you just sit down and play, yeah, you could probably, you know, in more or less that amount of time, and then you won't need too much. You know, you might sometimes die too many times and need one of these passwords, but yeah, you know. Gex short video game review. Gex is a gecko who is absolutely addicted to television. So one day when he gets grabbed and pulled into his television, into the media dimension, by Rez, a being consisting entirely of silvery, sharp fingers and teeth, obviously he quotes all the things he's seen on TV, and the media dimension is exactly the kind of place you would think he would love if everything wasn't trying to kill him, because everything in this game is a reference to something that you've seen on television if you watch TV during the 90s. It's every single overall area is made up of, you know, they're separated into horror, you know, animation, adventure films, martial arts, and martial arts films. And yeah, they're all, you know, the martial arts films, you've got Raiden, let's be honest. You know, in the cemetery, you've got lizard Frankensteins running around. The you know, the animation one, if you step on a carrot suspended in midair, it will get eaten. You don't see Bugs Bunny, but yeah, that's what it is. You encounter Smurfs that are purple with green hats instead of blue with white hats. Yeah, everything is a reference to this is a game built from TV addiction, MST3K, and just, you know, and pure concentrated snark. And it's really it's amazing that they managed to, I guess because everything is just vague enough. Well, you know, there are a lot of direct references, but yeah, somehow they didn't have to pay an insane amount for all these licensed things in this official game. You know, Gex is not that they made. I'm almost certain they made Gex up for this game, and you know, then there are the 2 more games. It would make a ton of sense to make another game today, because today it's more, you know, widely accepted to just obsess over media, and yeah, this kind of thing. Although I don't pay enough attention, it's possible that something that, you know, a game that has just absorbed a ton of pop culture is already out there. But yeah, it's a ton of fun as a platformer, and it has the, as far as I know, unique ability of you can attach yourself to any flat surface, and this includes walls, ceilings, rockets flying in midair, you know, platforms that sink, and so on and so forth.